I'm Greg Albo from the York University of Political Science and also the Center for Social Justice. Today's session is on trade unions, pensions, corporations, and the state. I think configuring all the obstacles that we confront in one session. It'll feature Doug Henwood and Sam Ginden speaking today. This has been a part of a series of workshops that we've held over the fall on pensions, unions, and working class strategies. This has been supported in particular by the Center for Social Justice, but also as well Socialist Project, the Greater Toronto Workers' Assembly, the Global Labour Research Centre at York University, the Chair in Comparative Political Economy at York University, and also Kevin Scarrett at CUPE up here, who's also been critical to organizing of it all. The Center for Social Justice has been organizing educationals and workshops for many years. We will hope to organize again in the winter something on ecological socialism and contemporary capitalism, another series of workshops and reading groups. Also potentially in the summer or fall, next fall, on healthcare struggles, and a bunch of other things are on the plan. As the Center for Social Justice is a charitable organization that relies on voluntary contributions, if you can take out a form and leave a donation, that would be good. It's how we kind of put things on that are free for the community. In this series of workshops, we covered a lot of different grounds. We were looking at the beginning on the size and volume of the pension funds in Canada, which are around 1.1 trillion now. They are huge. They're bigger than many of the sovereign wealth funds. In a report from Bloomberg today, it was noted that the Canadian pension funds are particularly active in the restructuring of contemporary corporate firms. Right now, they have engaged in about $8.4 billion in mergers and acquisitions, far outstripping actually the biggest takeover firms or buyout firms in the US by far, about triple the volume that is being done by those has been undertaken by the Canadian pension funds. As we were discussing, this has raised a lot of contradictions and difficulties. It certainly has been a problem in terms of trying to identify ethically responsible or socially responsible investment funds. It's also raised a lot of political contradictions for unions because the largest funds are public sector union funds. These public sector union funds then are often engaged in anti-union, anti-worker practices. So it raises a lot of political difficulties. There was a specific session on dealing with some of the new activities, in particular on the privatization of the public sector through often these pension funds being critical sources of funds in the P3ing of the public sector. So these were some of the big issues that we're confronting. The last session dealt with some of the larger issues of financialization and what confronts pensions in Canada, and more generally. And that is particularly what we're going to take on today. Today we're going to focus especially on alternative strategies for pensions for the left and unions. Obviously this involves going beyond what has been the largest attempt in the last 20 or 30 years under the phase of neoliberalism, which had a lot to do with various notions of strengthening shareholder power. Some of this has come forward in Canada for the various campaigns about expanding the Canada Pension Plan. But obviously to deal with the whole range of pension issues and dealing with some of the issues of where these pension plans are invested involves something a hell of a lot more ambitious and radical than what has been on the agenda. The CLC has engaged in a good campaign at times on expanding the Canada Pension Plan, but none of it connected to some of the questions of how it would operate, some of the questions of where investments goes, and some of the more radical and ambitious things that have come forward in our discussion so far. This also raises a question of how we would reorder the three main components of our mixed pension system in Canada, that is between the public component, the employer component, and what we invest ourselves individually. It also deals with the components, what we would do in reordering the three components of the Canadian pension plan between the OAS, the GIS, and the CPP. One of the other things that has come up when we've been looking at pensions is exactly how much, to the extent that capitalism itself is an obstacle in the way that pension funds have moved their holdings, and what the contradictions that has raised in terms of pensions. That is not only just about the socially responsible investment funds, but the active role that the pension funds have been playing in privatization. So it involves kind of confronting that, but also putting forward an alternative agenda. And what might be some of the alternative usages of an expanded Canada pension plan might undertake. There is also the question that has been a long-standing debate on the left over public pension plans of how much it should be a pool of funds or run on a pay-as-you-go basis. So even if there's a notion of expanding the Canada pension plan, it runs into this question of how much it should be on a pay-as-you-go basis. Our pension plan is already at about $180 billion. It has a fund that would operate for about 4 or 5 years. And after that, the expansion of it would involve increasing that fund or shifting more on the basis of contributions, funding it as we go. There is also the question of putting that use, as has often come up out of the ecological movement of attempting to use larger term, the pension funds, pools, expanded pension funds for dealing with longer term questions of a transition to alternative energy usages and so forth, dealing with the issues of climate change. As we know, in Canada we have no agenda on this except to get the tar sands going as quickly and as massively as possible. So it raises obviously large political questions around any alternative usage. And I think that's to a large extent, that's the final thing that I know our speakers will address, and that is the role of the pensions. Any expanded role for pensions or reordering pension funds obviously has to be connected to some sort of resurgent left. It's impossible to imagine an expansion of the pension plan structure or new modalities or how it operates without an expanded left. Now in Canada we know that this has some history, that the Canadian pension plan largely arrives out of working class struggles and partly out of the social democratic struggles in the formation of the CCF and the NDP. But expanding it is obviously going to have to go beyond those politics. Some of the senior struggles that have occurred in the 1990s were important in expanding the pension plan, but we're obviously at a point where those struggles and what they expanded are evaporating with the slowdown in some of the benefit structures and the extension of the age limits on receiving a pension. In Europe, pension struggles have been an important part of anti-austerity struggles, but it's also been a very mixed record there. They haven't sustained themselves. Many countries, there's been sharp pushbacks around pensions. When we look at it more widely, there's been a lot of two-tiering of pensions. What's occurred in North America extensively is the movement from defined benefit to defined contribution plans. Just over the last week, we saw that the liabilities for the Canada Post was used often as the main explanation for the need, or the second main explanation for the need to privatize and cut services alongside the decline of mail service. So there's a lot of issues related to an alternative agenda for pension plans. We have today two of the best commentators on a range of issues related to financialization, the left strategies, and both have engaged in their work and writing on questions related to pensions.